Welcome to Negotiating Happiness, the show that helps you find happiness, success, and balance in your work and life. I'm Adriana, your host for this journey into entrepreneurship and personal growth. We're broadcasting live on 107.7 and 105.3 FM in New Orleans as part of the United Public Radio Network. We explore the latest strategies, insights, and stories from successful entrepreneurs and experts. From managing stress to building a thriving business, we've got you covered. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Adriana and you are watching Negotiating Happiness. It is February 5th, 2024. I can't believe it. And here we are on another Monday. So grab your coffee, grab your lunch, and let's dive in. We are indeed broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio at 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. And if you wanted to sit back and watch a couple of our shows from the network on Roku TV, go ahead and search up UFO Paranormal. So today we have a special episode planned, just like every week. We are going to be talking to the lovely Jen Paterson from Dollar Divas, and we are talking about overcoming money shame because it's such a big topic. Even though we don't talk about it, I am pretty sure everybody thinks about it at some point or another, especially in the sphere of entrepreneurship. So here's a quick summary of what we'll be talking about. We'll dive into the pervasive financial education gap that often leaves individuals feeling ashamed about their money struggles. Societal expectations assume that everybody should naturally be adept with finances, creating a sense of embarrassment when faced with financial challenges. We'll explore how the absence of formal teachings on personal and business finances in school perpetuates this shame, reinforcing the misconception that financial competence is intuitive. Join us as we discuss the importance of open conversations, accessible resources, and community support to break the stigma and empower individuals to confidently navigate their financial journeys. And so let's do a quick reintroduction of who Jen is. I don't know if anybody remembers, but Jen was on our show probably about 6 or 7 or 8 weeks ago. So I can't wait to have her come back on. And let's dive in. So who is Jen? Jen is a financial professional with a unique background. Raised in a household where money was openly discussed, she initially navigated the world of business as the right hand to a dance studio owner. Later, as a financial planner, Jen observed a common struggle amongst passionate entrepreneurs. While excelling in their crafts, they faced financial instability. Now, Jen is on a mission to help entrepreneurs stabilize their cash flow, allowing them to focus on their passion without sacrificing business growth. So I can't wait to have her on. She's going to pop up in a minute here. Just going to check in. And then we're going to dive into a couple of stats here that I've gathered. I don't know if you guys are a fan of stats, but I definitely am. So here we go. Jen is in the waiting room. We're just going to pop her in. Hello, Jen. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks so much for popping on.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. So I have to give a little bit of I'm momming and entrepreneuring at the same time. So I'm trying to get tickets for my daughter for Frozen, the touring show that's coming to our city in July, and tickets literally went on sale at 10 o'clock Pacific time, which is right when this show airs. So Adriana has been so kind to being like, okay, just let me know when you're ready. And so I'm just looking at the confirmation and it's all good. I have mommed. Amazing. I am now ready to entrepreneur.
Amazing. Isn't that funny how just we don't have a choice around the whole momming thing?
Oh my gosh. It's just, like, yeah.
Who else was going to get those tickets? Do you know what I mean?
No, nobody else was going to get those. And it's just, yeah, that's how this goes, you know, motherhood, right?
Yes. So tell me, how did you start off your Monday aside from ticket hunting?
It was a pretty standard Monday for us. You know, I've got up, got my kids to school, answered a few emails. I managed to squeeze a workout in this morning, so that was really nice. It was a great way to kind of kick off the week and, feeling like I'm on top of things and not starting the week behind. So I always really appreciate when things on Monday morning go smoothly. When they go a little sideways, then I find myself getting a little squirrely.
Right, exactly. I mean, who doesn't get a little squirrely when that happens? But that's good. That's good. I'm glad. So, I can't wait to talk to you about overcoming money shame because I feel like it's such an important topic to talk about, and a lot of entrepreneurs, like even in closed circles, I still feel a little bit icky talking about money. So I need you to tell me, in your professional opinion, how does that usually go? Like, what do you feel like happens when these conversations pop up?
It honestly, it depends on the situation. Like, I'm definitely not going to go to a cocktail party where I'm just meeting people for the first time and be like, hey, what is your salary? I'm not quite that awkward and weird, but at the same time, I think that it's really important for these conversations to happen, because it lifts us all, right? It lifts us all to talk about these things and make everybody else, comfortable with it in a way that, again, lifts us all up. So when I'm kind of talking around here. So I'll give you an example because I think that's the best way to discuss this. I was having drinks with a couple of girlfriends about a week ago, and within the sort of grouping, it was two entrepreneurs and a salaried worker type, and we got to talking about the one other entrepreneur's pricing. She is a solopreneur, she runs her own business, and she was saying, oh, I think I might need to raise my rates, and because gas prices are going up, because she moves around a lot in her business. And I said, well, when was the last time you raised your rates? And she said, well, it was right when the gas prices kind of took off, and most of it's I didn't really pocket any of it because it all went to gas, and and I'm really nervous. And I said, well, why are you nervous? Do you think that anyone's gonna come back at you and complain? And and we had this conversation of her being really afraid to raise her rates. And I said, well, what are your competitors charging? And she said, oh, well, they're charging almost double, or and things like this. And I said, well, that's insane. Like, if your competitors,
Right.
who I don't know them, but I know you and I know you're amazing at what you do, if they're charging, more than you, and you're stressing about raising your rates, like, this is a problem that we need to put our heads together, and we need to help you
Right.
overcome this. Like, me as your friend, this other person as your friend, like, let's talk about this. Let's help you through it. And so, in having that conversation, you know, I don't know if she actually went through with raising her rates, but I'm definitely going to follow up with her and be like, let's talk about that
Right.
some more, because you deserve to earn what you're worth. And so there's definitely a time and a place, but these conversations are important, because all keeping it close to the vest does is hold you back from earning what you truly can. And you get up a group of dudes together and they'll talk about money all day long without shame, without
Yeah.
like, they are quite happy to share their salaries, what their bonus was, or like, hey bro, I just got this huge bonus, like, I'm gonna go and buy a boat, I don't know.
Right.
Like, these are conversations that they're more than
It's
happy to
true.
have. And so we see it in the glass ceiling and the wage gap and all of this stuff. And so we're shamed into talk of, around talking about money. It's uncouth, it's rude, it's all of these things. Is gauche. I think I even heard someone say, oh, it's gauche. I was like,
Hmm.
that's interesting. But when you bring it out into the open, like, we're willing to talk about everything from, like, what we do in the bathroom to what we do in the bedroom, but somehow our bank accounts are off limits. Like, it's just bizarre.
I also wanted to add that as a service provider, it actually not only does it hold you back personally when you don't charge what you're supposed to be charging, there's a perceived lessening of value. So if you're going to a service provider that is like a quarter of what everybody else is charging, people automatically think you must not be good at what you do. So People tend to shy away from that too, and sometimes service providers don't think about that, but it's 100% true. It puts doubts in your client's mind that you know what you're doing, because how could you possibly be charging so much less than everybody else, right? So
Exactly.
it's damaging on a lot of fronts, let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
so it starts, but it starts before we dive into this entrepreneurship thing, right? So I tried to look up some stats, and I want to know if you agree with any of these. So I tried to look up some American stats for our American friends and for our Canadian friends as well. So we I was looking up, and it says 71% of Americans believe that they have high financial literacy levels. The average American rates their financial literacy at 6.2 out of 10, despite the fact that on tests the average American only answers 35 to 55% of questions correctly. And to dive in even further, which hurts my millennial heart, only 16% of millennials understand basic financial principles. Like, if this doesn't say it all, I don't know what does. Right?
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Canadians, we don't want, hold on, we don't want to like only highlight the American side of things, but so overall, it's hard because you can't get the same kind of stats for both places, but overall, just bear with me. Has a point. It says South Korea leads the pack as the most educated country in the world, with a tertiary education rate of 69.29%, securing the top spot. Canada follows closely behind at 66.36%, earning the second position for most educated countries. However, when you get down to financial literacy rate, only 15% consider themselves financially literate when it comes to life insurance, investments, and stocks. According to the poll, while 60% admit to having a personal or monthly budget, only 29% have taken an education course about finance or personal budget management. So, of course, it's relative. Of course, you might know more than what you think you are. So maybe that 15% is higher, or maybe it's lower. Who knows? The whole point of it is, obviously we have the resources, obviously we're educated in a lot of different subjects, but when it comes to financial literacy specifically, what happened? What happened?
Because our formal education system assumes that the family, because I think it stems back to, finances are a personal subject and everybody does it a little bit differently, and all of that stuff. I think that it stems back to the education system, is like, well, we don't want to put our centralized beliefs, quote unquote, on the people, and so you can teach that stuff at home. But what happens is they don't actually teach it at home. Parents have financial conversations behind closed doors or after kids are asleep, because they don't want to, it may be on the sort of more sort of good parenting side of things. I don't say good parenting, but like the people who are trying really hard to be that parent, is they don't want to put the stress on the kids. They don't want their kids to see them feeling stressed out or having to, make those decisions. But that means the kids aren't exposed to it. So it makes it really hard. And so the kids aren't exposed to it. Then they grow up and become adults and, or get essentially handed the keys to the car without any driving lessons. And
Right.
they go out, they get credit cards, they get jobs, bank accounts, maybe even a mortgage, loans, and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to navigate this world, because maybe with the best of intentions, parents are having these conversations behind closed doors to not pass on the stress, but it also means the knowledge isn't being passed down either. And also,
Right.
our financial world has just gotten more and more and more and more complicated as time has progressed. You think back, 2-3 generations ago, essentially it was, you had a little bit of money, but most people were, farmers, that their job was to make the food, grow the food, and essentially survive. You had a little bit of money maybe for like, the odds and ends that you would buy like once or twice a month or even less. Whereas now, money is central to our very existence. A day doesn't go by without money passing hands in order for our society to continue to function. And so it's a very difficult situation, because what we're facing isn't necessarily what our parents were facing.
Right.
It's a lot harder. It's a lot different. I talk to my mom about this quite frequently, how parenting today and even just existing today is so much different than when she was in our shoes 30 some odd years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's a disconnect as well, because then they don't have the knowledge to pass on. So they feel like, well, this is how we did it, but that's not going to work for you guys because it's such a different environment. So it's
Right.
almost coming from both sides. Like we're just kind of screwed.
Right. So, well, it kind of shows that too because I looked up a few more stats because that was kind of general for the population, which kind of gives me an indication of what kind of financial literacy I need to explore with my kid, right? But let me look at what the entrepreneur, let's see. So this is for American stats. So according to a survey by the National Endowment for Financial Education, which is the NEFE, in 2018, only 27% of entrepreneurs felt very confident in their ability to manage their business finances. That is
Yeah.
such a low number. And for the fact that some of these entrepreneurs are so like wildly successful and not knowing how to handle that is detrimental to the future success of that business, right?
Yeah.
And there's another study conducted by Intuit, which I think it's the QuickBooks
Yes.
parent company, in 2019 found that 61% of small business owners struggled with financial management, including tasks like creating financial forecasts and budgeting. I am one of those people. Like I have the
Well,
tools, I use them. I don't enjoy doing them, therefore I put no further effort into educating myself on how to do it better. Right? That's the problem. That's the
yeah.
problem because I
Yeah.
had to basically learn everything on the fly. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not alone. And like I remember talking to somebody who was a massage therapist, and she said, like we go to school for years to learn all the different techniques and strategies
yeah.
to apply our practice and apply our trade and heal people's bodies. And she said the money management part was literally one workshop, one day for 2 hours. Like that was it. And that was
Yeah.
all the financial education she got. And she said most like massage therapists are solopreneurs, contractors, like they're in charge of their finances. And yet their education on how to navigate that was a 2 hour workshop.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
again, disconnect. So, again, another one was talking to a lawyer. She said, I went to school for, I don't know how long law school is, 3 years ish. Like that's a long haul. And again, they
Yeah.
learn how to write a brief. They learn how to argue a case.
Yeah.
They learn how to talk to clients. She said, I hadn't a clue how to run a business. Like
Right. So
not
we
a clue.
did
She said, I
have
had to figure that out on the fly too.
yeah, if as in contrast to the I guess education for lawyers and yeah, they have to do a bachelor's, right? They have to do their 4 years in school for a bachelor's and then they go to law school. So that's actually a lot of school that you go through where you don't have any of that exposure.
So much
For
schooling.
paralegals, the program that I went to, you had to have a degree ahead, but you actually don't need to if you want to do the 2 year certificate. So regardless, everybody in my class already had previous same thing, 3-4 years of post-secondary school. Then you're in here getting your accelerated post-grad certificate to become a paralegal. We did have a course where we learned how to run our business, but it was a 7-week course where it was kind of implied that you already understood what expenses were and how you came into contact with assets. Like it was funny. On paper it made sense, but that was basically it. And it's
Yeah.
crazy that with lawyers that actually end up running the firms that paralegals work for, if you're not going to go off on your own, don't have even that because everybody else assumes that, well, we're teaching you about what your regulatory responsibilities are. So, for example, because we were regulated by the Law Society, we were taught what our financial responsibilities were in terms of the Law Society rules. But nobody's talking about how do you split this profit? How do you take it home? How do you save it? How do you invest it? How do you make sure that it's working for you? Nobody. It's just a question of money in, money out. Do you understand? Okay, great. Because it's especially in law in Ontario, it's a double accounting system, right? You've got your trust and your general, right, to keep
Yeah.
track of. But again, it's just money in, money out. It's nothing crazy. So
Mhm.
you think that you know, and you think you're going to go out there and be like, yeah, of course, I already took a course, I know, but nobody actually addresses the whole, okay, so this is what you're left with. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
What are you going to do?
absolutely. And I'll even go as far as like when I was doing my licensing to become a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Financial advisor. Like
Yeah.
I learned about insurance and how that world works. I learned about how, the investment world works, like, all of that stuff. But the day-to-day running of cash flow never came up. Not
Right.
once. And
Right.
you know, a lot of financial advisors will get good at it because they are already within that like, mindset, and that's their interest and they love it. But again, still no like formal how to do this. And that's for someone who's literally going to be advising people with their money. Like
Yeah.
that, it's bananas. So, and
I'm
then
not
let's
shocked. I'm not shocked at all.
put that aside. And, this is also assuming that everyone does post secondary, which they
Yeah.
don't. That's, I would say even in the climate that we're sort of in, post secondary is becoming less and less valuable, and a lot of the like Gen Zs, they're bypassing it altogether and just heading out into the workforce and figuring it out on their own because we're realizing that a BA in English is not going to get you very far these days. So
Right.
that's assuming that. And I think back to my high school days, and I remember we did have a, a class, we'll call it. It was called CAP, Career and Personal Planning. And
Uh-huh.
in the 5 years of my high school, we had this once a week for an hour for an entire 5 years of my high school. And we talked about finances one time, and it was they showed us a tax form, what it looked like, and that was about it. It was like this is a T, I think it was a T1 that they showed us. It was a T1 or a T5, and they're like, that's what this is.
Great.
That was it. That was our
Yeah.
education on taxes, and it was like, talk to your parents. That was
Yeah.
it.
And funny enough, I actually, when I first started out, I decided that I didn't know enough about taxes, which is still correct. And because you reminded me of the whole T1, T5 thing. So the CRA sometimes has webinars that they run for entrepreneurs for taxes, which is great. I mean, look them up. But I have to tell you, no offense to anybody there, but I came out of that knowing even less than what I knew before. And not because they weren't teaching it, it's because it was the most excruciating thing I've ever had to sit through, where it's like doing math. So instead of explaining concepts and how to structure your business around those concepts so that people can understand how to apply it day to day, it was kind of like going through a form. And I'm like, nobody needs to know that because most of us will get our accountant to do it. What we don't understand is how those equations actually affect us day to day
Yeah.
before we file those taxes, right? So I feel like there was such a disconnect between, you know, saying that they're providing education, and they are on paper, they are providing that education and making it available to the public. But as somebody who's taken that, and I'm good at math, I'm okay at math, I can do lots of quick math in my head, I can do more complex math if I have some time. Sure, I understand how to do that. I understand money in, money out. And that webinar was probably a 3 hour, like, I don't even know if it was 3 hours or if it felt like 3 hours, but it was wild. I was like, I
Yeah.
should not have taken this because it was definitely, there's no translation between what was
Yeah.
being said and what we were. And I don't think I was the only one. I'm pretty sure most of the people there like turned off their cameras by like halfway through it to be like, I can't deal with this. So I don't know if they were listening in the background or not, but it was brutal, absolutely brutal. And who knows, maybe it's just me, but I'd like to think that I have some average understanding of what's being said. And, like, because of my previous life, I have an average understanding of structures. Are you a general partnership? Are you a sole proprietor? Are you a corporation? So I should have understood a little bit more about taxing and how to make it work for me, and I didn't. I really didn't. So I think this is not just like a school problem or a home problem. I think this is like an entire society problem. Whichever institution you go to, whichever regulatory body you belong to, I don't think there's enough financial education.
No. No, there's absolutely not. And, I think even just the basics of being able to read a financial contract, people
Mm-hmm.
don't understand how to read a financial contract.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in credit counseling for a number of years before I was a financial advisor. And a lot of times clients would come to us and they'd say, well, this is interest free. And you'd say, well, actually, that's not how this works. You look at like those credit cards with the interest free periods. And what people don't understand is that if you pay the balance off within that interest free period, yes, you don't pay it and you walk away and everybody's happy and whatever. If you go one day over that interest free period, all of the interest that has been accumulating in the background for that interest free period, be it a year, 18 months, 6 months, whatever, that all
Becomes
gets
due.
lumped
Yeah.
on day 91 or whatever it is. Like it all gets, it's an entire chunk. It's not just it starts accumulating then. It's been accumulating since you got the loan, the credit card, the whatever, and it all just gets lumped on that day. And so,
Yeah.
little things like that and how to read that language, the general public I have found don't necessarily grasp those things or know how to read them within a contract before they sign
Right.
it.
Right. And it's wild now thinking back that I was 18 and maybe I won't name the bank, but I think they're all the same, honestly. They decided that, so back in 2007, they decided that an 18-year-old with a part time job in retail was allowed to have a $2,500 credit card.
Oh my.
Who decided that? Like, who thought that that was a good idea? And I'll tell you who, banks, because I probably paid that credit card like 6 times over. Do you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? That's how much interest they probably like made off of me because I
Oh,
had zero knowledge. But I could walk into that bank, and I walked in that bank that day, and I applied for a credit card, $2,500 limit.
they saw you coming a mile away, and you know who thought it was a good idea? The entire institution. Do you know why? It's
Yes,
because that is how they make money. That is how,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
the there's a saying in the financial advising world is you don't invest with banks, you invest in banks.
yeah, 100%. That's what I'm
Right?
saying. I probably paid it 6 times over in interest
Yeah.
alone. So
Yeah.
of
So they
course
thought
they
it was a
wanted that.
fantastic idea because
Yeah.
they just saw dollar signs. They just saw a
Yes.
big fat profit.
Yes.
And that's the case. And, especially again with credit cards, another misunderstood financial instrument, because a lot of people will think like as they're making payments, the interest is going down, but it's not the case. The interest doesn't stop accumulating on every purchase you've ever made until you pay it down to zero. That's
Yeah.
when the interest stops. So if you bought a
Yeah.
TV and paid off $500, of the balance, you're still getting charged for the, full balance of that TV until you pay it to zero. Like,
Yeah.
and again, it's a cash cow for the companies. Like they are just raking in the dollars
Of course.
on our misunderstanding of financial instruments.
Of course, and it's like I've seen people do this over and over and how they pay one credit card off with another, or how they pay one credit card off with like a loan, maybe a line of credit, which I understand the logic. Usually lines of credits are like lower interest. However, you're literally paying interest on interest on interest, and that is
Yeah.
how they get rich is interest on interest. So instead, in the last couple of years, I've tried to kind of think outside the box. Not that I've done anything with it. It's just me slowly beginning. How do I make compound interest? Because that is how people get rich. People don't get rich by saving. I'm sorry to anybody who's a great saver. I am not. That you don't get rich by that. You get rich by putting your money to work. So
Mm-hmm.
once you get to the point where you have a bunch of interest that you've gained, putting that free money to work is compounded interest. That is how you really start making money from no money. Until then, it's all like an initial investment and the time investment and the education and the whatnot. So how how do we get over this? Like how do we teach each other? How do we warn each other what mistakes not to make, you know?
Well, this is where it comes back to that like conversations. Why conversations are so important and so critical, especially with, within groups of women. Find your people. Like find those people who are see the world the way you see it, who are supportive and kind, and then just start talking about it and be like, you know what? Hey, does anyone here like invest? Like, what do you invest in? Because that's a
Yeah.
really that's a tiptoe. into it, because investments are seen as, oh, it's good, it's exciting, it's kind of sexy. Like, that's something that, right? Like, it is, because if you
Yeah,
talk
no,
about your
it is. It
investments,
is. Yeah.
then it's not like, oh, how much is in your bank account, right? Like, that's a little bit like walking up to somebody and like grabbing their butt. But asking them over coffee or
I mean,
cocktails or
yeah.
whatever, like, what are your investments, or like, what are you guys investing in, or do you invest at all? Like, that's a kind of a tiptoe, and then you can kind of read the room and gauge whether or not the person you're talking to is open to a conversation about money. Are they
Yeah.
are they telling you, oh yeah, I bought this stock and this ETF and this is my favorite thing, and are they like that, or are they kind of like looking at the floor and shaking the subject? And you can kind of read the room with those conversations. And then once that
Yeah.
starts to happen, then you can really open up and be that person that opens up first. Be the person that says, hey, this is my situation, like, what would you guys do if you were me?
Right.
And don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, it's vulnerable, it's scary to be that first person that opens up, but I'm telling you, from someone who's been there and done it and had those conversations and has that relationship with other friends and entrepreneurs and peers, it's magical. It's so, like, I use that word not lightly. Like, it really is, because like, I feel like I've got a couple of girlfriends that I can literally call up and be like, hey, I've got this, like, I'm not sure what to do with this, particular situation when it comes to like my business, or, I've got this other investment. I'm not sure whether or not I should take a plunge on it. What do you think? And we can talk it out and hash it out and figure it out, because I know what they think about finances and money and investments. And I understand their perspective, and I value that. And I value their input, because I know they've been there. They've walked down this path as well.
Right.
And they've got a lot of wisdom to share.
Right. What what do you think of this? I don't know if you have a similar experience, but every time I would hear somebody talk about investments, it's always the rich dude that has investments. It was never the mom that, works like a side job. It was never, the university student or the newly graduated student that decide to invest whatever he has or she has. Like, how I just want to, like, my opinion is like, I want to bust right through that myth to be like, it doesn't have to be the rich dude that has the
Mm-hmm.
investments. Like, you can start off with literally like $100. There are stocks out there
Less
that
than
you
that.
can buy for $100 or less than that.
Less
I
than
know.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's just I'm
25.
trying to think. Yeah, 25.
$25
I,
is what you need to get in. That's
right,
generally the low bar mark. There's
right,
actually ways to invest with even less, but they're a little complicated. But usually $25 is your buy-in. That's it.
right. And it's
Like, that's
usually
not
like
much.
10 Canadian dollars a transaction. So once you purchase something, right, like they take 10 Canadian dollars from that. So there are fees for it, but the grand scheme of
And it
things,
depends
$10
on
is nothing.
like which avenues and how you invest in what things. But
Yeah.
again, like, these are conversation, like, I don't know how many times. So when I used to run Dollar Divas, you know, back in the day, we would have live events, and we would have like basically coffee shops where we'd get together and we just talk about money. And the number of times I was asked, what do I buy? How do I buy RSPs? As if it's like
Hmm.
a purse or a shoe. And I'm like, okay, so, let's talk about this, because whether you're in the States or in Canada or whatever, usually, these things are not something you go and buy. So an RSP, or I can't remember an IRA, I think they're IRAs in the States.
A Roth
They're
IRA.
just
Yeah.
Roth
Yeah.
IRAs. I think there's another one too. I can't quite remember. But anyway,
Is it like a
the retirement
401k?
accounts. No, because 401ks are
No.
generally sponsored by
Are they retirement?
companies. But
Oh,
like, they're within like an employment thing. I can't quite
maybe. I
remember.
don't know.
Anyway, it's
Canadian
irrelevant.
listen. I mean,
Canadian
American
listeners,
listeners,
we're
help us
talking
out.
RSPs.
I know, but help us out,
American
American
listeners.
listeners.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Roth IRA is one of them, and I know there's another one, but it's slipping my mind right now. Anyway, they're umbrellas. They're something that you just put money under, and you can have different accounts, and it's not something you buy like a shoe or a purse or a coffee mug. It's a classification of
Right.
investment. So once it's under the RSP umbrella or the IRA umbrella, then you can move it around to different things. You don't tie it into one investment just because you bought, let's say, some Tesla stock in RSPs,
Right.
doesn't mean you can't sell that Tesla stock and buy Apple. You can do that and keep it under the RSP umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And you can invest in hundreds of different things within the RSP limits. Like if you just look up on your government website, you'll find like what qualifies as an RSP investment. As long as it's under the umbrella, you're good to go. And so
Right.
that's another misconception, is they think they have to go to the bank and buy an RSP. And it's like, that's
That's
not the
what I
case.
did. That's what I did. I went to the bank, and I think mine are called mutual funds. So the bank
Yes, they
invests them on
probably
my
are.
behalf. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the bank invests them on my behalf. It is embarrassing how little I've contributed, but that's what I always thought, and so that's what I did, right?
Yeah, and that's another one is mutual funds and ETFs and stocks and bonds, and how little education there is on how those different instruments work and what are the pros and cons on both sides. And a
Right.
lot of times with mutual funds, quite often the fees on them are like sky high, and people don't know how to read
Yeah.
those reports and those statements and those. You get the big book that comes with it, the prospectus. They have no clue how to read that, and they're so
I've
overwhelmed and
never read it.
intimidated by it that it usually just ends up in a pile or in the recycling bin.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
don't even get cracked because it's just too much. It's
Right.
scary. It's overwhelming. And they're like, I can't deal with this. So, like even how to read those things is so important, because, one mutual fund is not the same as every other mutual fund. So they all have their pros and their cons, and, what works and what doesn't. And, what's the difference between a mutual fund and a segregated fund and an ETF? Like all of those things, it's really important information,
Right.
and that's something that very few people feel like they can talk about or grasp. And,
Right.
sometimes mutual funds will have a high fee structure, but they'll have a phenomenal manager that makes it worth it, whereas some may not. And, how do you know, and
Yeah.
who do you talk to? And again, that's why these conversations are so important.
Yeah, I think I stuck some money in mutual funds, and then I think I selected medium risk, and as a result, it's probably grown like $15 in like 6 years. So, not great. But as a professional, if you're working with a lot of solopreneurs or people that work by themselves, what would you say is the most important? Like obviously, what, let's say, assume that everybody's got their cash flow in check. Okay, assume that that's in check. Assume that everything is getting paid. What is the most
That's a big
important
assumption.
investment? I know, but I'm just assume so that this
All right.
question works for me. Okay,
All
so
right. All right.
assume
So
that
you
that's
have
done.
you have some ulterior motives here. I get it. Okay.
Yes.
So cash flow is in check. Everything's functioning great. Like, where do you go next, and how do you
Yeah.
make the most of your dollars? And that's the
Yes.
question on everyone's mind, right? So
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in ETFs. I love ETFs. I think they're a fantastic instrument. They don't try and beat the markets. I'm a believer that if you try and beat the markets, they'll kick you when you're down, and then when you're down even further, they'll kick you again. So trying to beat the market can be done, but it's very difficult. Whereas something like an ETF, it follows the market. So
Give
if
us an
we
example
have,
of what an ETF is, though, because I feel
so
like not everybody
it's
would
called
know.
an exchange traded fund. So how it works is they take some sort of basic either index or group of funds that's already established. So some of them will follow like the S&P 500, some of them will follow there's another one. I'm sorry, it escapes my mind again. This is stuff I don't really deal with on a day-to-day basis. But like they will pick an index and they'll just follow it. And the way that I look at things personally is, if the market as a whole has too much downturn, we have bigger problems, because that means our economy is not functioning. So
Right.
while you will have the ebbs and flows of the markets, of the economy, especially when we're in, recessions and things like that, yes, you won't always be in the uptick. However, over time, particularly for people in our generation who are, their 20s, 30s, 40s, we've got time before we're looking at retirement, hopefully, or maybe not. Maybe you are early retirement types. In that case, congrats. But for the most of the people I'm
Yeah.
talking to, you've got some time. And so you can weather those storms that ebb and flow. And investing in the markets will give you over time better returns than trying to beat the market with an actively managed fund. So it's considered a passively managed fund, meaning they just pick an index and they're like, we're just going to follow this. And whatever this does, then that's what we're going to do. Whereas an actively managed fund is somebody trying to pick and choose the winners of, who's going to do best and who's when to trade that. And that can be successful, but it's very difficult. And there are a couple of really great fund managers out there that do it well, and there's a lot that don't.
Right.
So, and then the other thing you have to take into consideration is the fees. So with an actively managed fund, they have much higher fees because you have that guy sitting in a room picking and choosing and trying to beat the markets. Whereas with a passively managed fund, the fees are considerably lower. ETFs have like much, much lower fees. So you're not trying to not only beat the markets, but also beat out those fees in terms of your returns. So that's where my money personally is. That's where my husband and I have invested and done quite well over the last, I think we moved things over about 5 years ago into ETFs. They are relatively new kind of guide to the party, but I'm a big believer in them. And I think that they're a great way to go about it. And, you can usually go, financial advisors will offer them, but also the DIYs offer them as well. So we're personally with Questrade. I love it. I think it's a great platform. There's also Wealthsimple. I know there's a whole bunch down in the States, I think.
There's a ton.
I had it in my head. I can't quite remember.
I feel like our American friends have so many more financial platforms than we do, right? So
they sure do. Although they don't have e-transfers, which always makes me
no, but they have Venmo and Cash App and like all these other things that we don't have, right? So it kind of makes sense, yeah. What do you think about using life insurance for the purpose it's actually intended for? Because a lot of people have this idea that life insurance is strictly for when you die, and that's most definitely a benefit of it. However, that's not what it's intended for. What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, life insurance is a really versatile product if used correctly. So again, the misconception is you buy like what's called a term policy, meaning like, it's pretty low frills. If somebody keels within the policy time frame, then, you get this chunk of change. Otherwise, if they live beyond the term of the policy, then it's like, oh, well, you're out of luck, tough luck, see you later. And those have their place. Absolutely. I think term policies are great for young parents who, if a parent dies, they need a huge cash payout. They don't have a lot of money. They're fantastic. And like both my husband and I have term policies on each other because of the nature of our lives. But there's also other life insurance that is very, very powerful, can be very, very useful. And the younger you get it, the more powerful it's going to be. So it's called whole life insurance. And again, I want to say this is all just general information.
Of course.
I'm just going to put that out there so nobody sues me. This is all very just general information. Talk to your financial advisor.
You all need to pick up the phone and go talk to your own providers and your own financial people. The purpose of this episode is to get people talking about money, and that's exactly what Jen and I are doing. So this is almost like a private conversation that you get to listen in on.
Yes. All right. Okay. So just with that little disclaimer out of the way. So whole life insurance is a really, really powerful tool that I think is underutilized in the financial community and with a lot of people, particularly again in our generation, because it's something that you can put money aside in, it builds cash value, and it never expires. So if I live to 130, my whole life policy is going to tick along with me, and it's only growing in value. So when I first got my whole life insurance policy, I think it was worth like $75,000, and there was no cash value and on that day one and whatever. And I've had it for about 10 years now. Gosh, maybe longer. I'm trying to remember when I actually got that thing, but it's now worth about $500,000, and it's got about $50,000 in cash value. So like that will just build over time, and the cash value will continue to build over time. And the cash value, like I can use that to loan myself money. So I can pull the cash value out of it without surrendering the policy as policy loan. So I know that there was one advisor that I worked with who would literally used their whole life insurance policy as their own personal bank. And he said, I took money out of it. I borrowed money out of it to buy my wife's engagement ring. He said, then, slowly paid that back. I took money out of it to buy a car at one point. I took money out of it for the down payment on my house. Like He literally used his own policy as his own personal bank account, his own personal loan vehicle, so that he didn't have to go and borrow outside and pay those interest rates and things like that. So, those are the things that you can kind of do with a whole life policy, as well as, generational wealth transfer and things like that. So, I know that when I kick it someday, that my kids, my husband, somebody in my line of lineage is going to get a big fat payout. And that's the amount of it is just going to grow over time. And if I desperately need cash for whatever reason, I've also got this backup, this safety net, this foundation ready and waiting for me. I can use it in retirement. There's so many different things you can do with it. And I would highly recommend chatting with your advisor. And I think Adriana got disconnected. I'm just going to quickly chat with her. And let's see what else can I talk about. I'm literally into my thought and she disappears. And then the other thing you can look at is like universal life insurance. It can also be a really powerful tool. I know a little bit less about that because I've been out of the life insurance game for a number of years now, and it's a little bit rusty. I haven't used the knowledge in quite a while, but it also can be a very, very powerful tool that you can look at. The other thing is, as a business owner, life insurance can fund things like buy-sell agreements, so that if you work with a partner and one partner dies, then the partner's spouse isn't left holding the buck trying to run a business that they know nothing about, and they can buy out the or the partner can buy out the spouse, so that they're still left with an asset but also aren't stuck trying to run this business that they know nothing about. So those can be really, really powerful tools. And, talk to an advisor about those kinds of options. If you are in a partnership and your business is thriving, like that can be a really, really powerful tool and a really great foundational tool to make sure that everything stays the way that you want it to within your business. So life insurance has a bad rap. I think because of the way that it's sold and the way that it's marketed. Life insurance is marketed by advisors who are all on commissions, which I think is massively backward. But it is a really, really powerful, powerful tool, and it can be very useful in a financial structure, as looking at it in a holistic way and using it to fund your retirement or many other things within your life is so, so important. And I'm just going to check in with Adriana and see if she is going to be able to jump back in here. Let's see here. Don't see any messages from her. Let's try over here. See if she messaged me on Instagram. So she says she's going to have to restart it. This is what happens with live stuff, right? Things get a little bit crazy and a little bit ridiculous.
Hi.
Oh, there she's back.
Hello. Everything definitely just went down, so that's like a typical Monday.
Well, I rambled on for a little bit longer about life insurance. I talked about some universal life stuff, which I have. It's so funny. I was literally end of my thought, and you vanished, and I was like, uh-oh. I guess I better keep talking. And so yeah, we sort of, made it work, ish. There's never a glitch free day, right?
Yeah. No, I feel like it's my laptop. It's not even my internet, but thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, I took up a policy for my son when he was born, and when I brought this up to a number of people in my life, they thought it was pretty morbid, and I literally was like, no, you don't understand. It's not because I think that something's gonna happen. That's just like a very small benefit of it, if God forbid, right? But I'm like, what if when he turns 18 he wants a car and I just don't have the cash flow or whatever, he can definitely dip into it, get himself a car, pay it off with no interest. And depending on the policy too, some of the, I think ours like ends when we hit 100. But I mean, listen, if I'm hitting 100, great. If I live past that, I'm good too. But I
Hopefully,
don't
that's the
need
idea,
it to
right?
go past that. Whereas with term insurance, yes, with term insurance, the premiums don't stay the same too. So once your term is up, right? If you're before 65, it is like exponentially higher
Yeah. And it depends on the
in the
contract too. Like
premium.
they're all a little bit different. Some
So
of
they
them
go
are
from
like
like
10-year terms,
$35
some of them
that
are
I'm not
20-year
even
terms.
getting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for something that I'm not even getting interest in. And I remember when
Yeah.
I talked to my insurance broker that we went over things like what is the average growth rate for this, right? In any case, it was better than a savings account. I think it ended up being something like 7% a year or something like that, right? Like that's a pretty big chunk of interest, especially if you're investing a lot of money. But I wanted to say that this is what rich people do. Rich people dump a bunch of money in life insurance policies and then they create their own bank. Just like you said, your friend would literally keep borrowing and paying it back. But I think that at some point, I don't think there's a term of paying it back. So if something happens, they just take it out of your death benefit, right? If
Yeah.
you don't end up paying
Yeah.
back the money, right? Because it's still your
Yeah.
money.
And I
That's
mean,
the
there's
whole
always like
point.
the fine print and you have to read it closely.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, I mean, if I say I took out, 20 grand out of my life insurance policy and used it to whatever, go on a really spectacular holiday, let's say, for example, then if I kicked it on my holiday, then they would just take it out of the payout and that would be the end
Right.
of that. And everyone would sort of dust their hands and be like, cool, we're done. But yeah,
Right.
I mean, you're right. Like term policies, like I said, they're really helpful and they're great. Like I said, and you have to read your contract. Like I said, is it a 10-year term? Is it a 20-year term? Like what have you signed up for? And be really clear and ask a lot of questions. Like don't feel when you're
Right.
in these meetings, don't ever
Right.
feel like you asking too many questions. Any financial advisor, if they're a good one, they will sit there and answer every question that you have, even if you ask the same question 5 different times and need 5 different explanations because you're not grasping what they're trying to say. Ask it again. Don't feel
Right.
stupid because that is how we learn. That is how we figure this stuff out. And that is, again, so important for the long term within our financial lives. Like you're not going to just magically understand it tomorrow. You have to ask the questions. You have to have the conversations. And, when we're talking about this stuff, it is really sometimes helpful to, ask the question 3 or 4 times to have them explain it in a different way because maybe your brain just works different than theirs and most likely does.
Of course, and that's the whole point of their job, right? Is to make these complicated concepts or complicated terms into, something that's chewable, something you can digest on. So, there's nothing to be ashamed of. I didn't learn this until I was I didn't have tree. I was very grateful for, right? So that's the whole point is have these conversations. What else can you do? Like how do these people that are so successful deal with their own money, right? And I know I hear this all the time that debt is bad, but there is good debt, right? There is good debt, there is bad debt. A lot of people have a lot of money avoid using their own money for their own investments, right? So I know these are very general ideas, but from these general ideas, you should have an understanding of so that if an idea sparks or for some reason you have some extra cash lying around at some point, do something with it, right? Protect yourself with it, pretty
I would
much.
even go so far as to say debt is not good or bad. Debt is just debt.
Right,
It's neutral. It's
right.
morally neutral. Like it's not good or bad. It's just a thing. It's like again, it's like a coffee cup.
But they
It's
teach you
just
that it's
there.
bad.
They teach you
They
that it's
teach
bad.
you that it's bad. Yes.
It's one of those things that on its own, it's just a thing. It's a way to make something else happen. And it can get you into trouble in the same way like hitting yourself over the head with a coffee cup's probably going to hurt. So, like there's good ways to use it and bad ways to use it, but on its own, it's neutral. And I think that's another thing that really would help a lot of people financially speaking, and that comes a little bit more to the mindset side of things than the actual strategy. But seeing it for what it is just a tool. It is a catalyst for making something else happen. Let's say, your credit card and you use it to, fund your business. It's not bad debt. It's just the thing that you used to fund your business while you were getting it off the ground. If you didn't pay it and ignored it and never quite got around to paying it off and, it went to collections, then there's going to be some negative repercussions. Absolutely. Your credit score is going to suffer. You're going to have collection agencies calling you. Like, there will be negative consequences, but it's not the debt necessarily. It's what you did after you utilized the debt of not, taking the proper steps to make sure that these consequences didn't happen. But I think seeing debt as a bad thing, it's evil, it's negative, it's terrible, I think that also does us a disservice, because
of course it does.
Again, we're going back to the uber wealthy. They borrow all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They borrow tons of money, and they borrow it to invest it, and they borrow it to grow it. And, there's lots of people who use what's called leverage loans, where they take out money and they just invest that money and they pay the interest only on those leverage loans, and then pocket what they earn from the investments. Because generally, if you do it properly, it will be more than you're paying in interest, and you end up better off at the end. Is it risky? Absolutely. It's hugely risky, but it can also be very powerful. So the debt itself is neutral. It's just it's like money. Money is neutral. It's what you do with it that's either positive, negative.
Right. I just think it goes along with our theme, to like that shame of owing somebody something.
Yeah.
Right. And about how you shouldn't be in that position to owe somebody something. But again, if we had the knowledge and the know-how of how to utilize debt, how to utilize money, how to utilize all these financial instruments that you've mentioned, then maybe we wouldn't be ashamed, because we'd have a much better understanding of how the world actually works, right? But I'm putting my conspiracy theorist hat on for just a second to be like, I feel like people just don't want us to know how money works because it's easier. Like, look at the banks. I'm telling you, 18-year-old me thought it was a great idea. So did the bank to give me $2,500 credit card. And was it a great idea? It was a terrible idea for me, right? But it was great for the bank. So
absolutely.
18-year-old me was forced me. Shoes. Yeah, but nobody forced me, so that's their argument, but also nobody taught me either, right? All I knew, like, my parents had bills and they were paid on time all the time. So they gave me a great example, but there's no literacy there. There was no, like, this is how you do it. So in an 18-year-old mind, it's like, well, I'm going to get money because I'm working, so then I'm going to pay it off, obviously. But practically, that's not how that works, right? There's just so many things that kind of go around. Jen, we were having such a great time talking that I didn't even do a halfway intro. I just realized. And then everything went down. But yeah, if you tuned in halfway, you are listening to the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. And we are streaming everywhere as well. And it's negotiating happiness. We're going to have to wrap up anyway. But thank you so much for having this lively conversation with me about money. I feel like we could talk about it forever. Maybe next time we can explore some practical things, and to kind of encourage people to go do their own homework and go ask their own questions. We'll talk about maybe some of those technical terms. Like, I kind of knew what an EFT was, but I'm so glad you had spelt it out, because I'm like, wait, I can't be the only one that doesn't know. Right? But thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk about this stuff for hours. I mean, I looked at the clock and was like, oh my gosh, it's already 11. Oh man, I could just keep going for hours. So yes. I had so much fun, and I love talking about this stuff.
Amazing. Yeah. So Jen here is in British Columbia. So she's on the other coast. So for us, it's 2 o'clock now. So
Right.
thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Jen, for coming on. I'm just going to wrap up. Big thank you to the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network. And next week, we will also have a guest. So stay tuned. We will post it shortly. Thank you and take care, everybody.